It took them long enough to realize what they were dealing with: the silent strategist, the psychological architect, the one who moves through chaos as if it were choreographed. They've been watching you, haven't they? Not the usual watchers this time, not the social media stalkers, not the bitter ex-friend who checks your page at 3 a.m. This is different. The new observers wear suits and badges, carrying clearance levels that would make your old enemies tremble. The Pentagon itself has taken notice. Yes, the actual Pentagon. There's a file on you now. And it's not because you're a threat to national security. It's because you've become the embodiment of it. You're not chaos. You're controlled precision. Your mind doesn't just think, it calculates. Your revenge wasn't emotional, it was algorithmic. Your psychological warfare wasn't something you learned, it was something you were born with and refined through the fires of betrayal. You wield it, like others, wield their morning coffee, naturally, effortlessly, devastatingly. They sent their best profilers to decode you, PhDs in behavioral analysis, psychological operations experts, specialists who have broken foreign spies and domestic terrorists. They studied your movements, your language, your methods, how you dismantled entire networks without ever raising your voice or lifting a hand. Their reports came back with the same conclusion: this individual operates on a level we need to understand. Their psychological architecture is unprecedented. Recruit or study, but do not ignore. What triggered their fascination wasn't your success or your transformation, it was the precision. The way you planted seeds of doubt so skillfully that they grew into forests of paranoia. The way you made those who betrayed you unravel themselves while you stood at a distance, calm and untouched, sipping tea as their illusions collapsed. They've seen violence before, they've seen revenge, but they've never seen someone turn psychology into a weapon of mass reconstruction. You didn't destroy for the sake of destruction. You rebuilt through revelation. So let's talk about what you did that made federal agents sit up in their sterile offices and whisper, "We need to understand this person." It all began with that first betrayal, the one that should have shattered you, the one where they smiled in your face while sharpening knives behind your back. Most people would have broken, cried, screamed, or thrown their pain into social media quotes, but you didn't. You did something far more terrifying. You studied them with precision, not just observing their behavior, but decoding their entire psychological DNA. Every insecurity they carelessly mentioned, you quietly stored. Every fear that slipped through their mask, you cataloged. Every weakness disguised as confidence was recorded in the vast library of your mind. You weren't plotting revenge. You were constructing a psychological blueprint of human vulnerability. You became a quiet architect, designing not destruction, but revelation. And when the moment came to act, you didn't strike with brute force, you moved with surgical precision. Your retaliation wasn't loud, it was calculated. It began not with confrontation, but with disappearance. You erased yourself from their story so completely that they started questioning whether you were ever real. Yet you left subtle traces, breadcrumbs of your evolution, proof that you had risen beyond their reach. Every success you achieved without them was a blade slicing through their delusion. Every image of you thriving became undeniable evidence that they were the problem, not you. Without a word, you made them doubt their own narrative of turning silence into your sharpest weapon. Then came the mirrors. You never revealed their secrets. You became the reflection that forced them to face themselves. Your presence alone was enough to expose them. Guilt flooded their hearts without you uttering a single accusation. You would enter a room, and they'd start to fidget, not because you threatened them, but because you reminded them of their own deception. Federal profilers later named it passive psychological dominance. You simply called it Tuesday. The Pentagon doesn't care about ordinary revenge. They see that daily violence, lawsuits, humiliation. None of that impressed them. What caught their attention was your method of psychological architecture. You rebuilt the perception of reality around your targets until they couldn't separate truth from illusion. You didn't fight them. You made them fight themselves. You turned their minds into cages and handed them the keys, knowing they'd never use them. Think about that person who betrayed your trust. You didn't expose them or retaliate publicly. Instead, you walked into their new world with quiet confidence. You connected with their circle, not to spy or sabotage, but to exist authentically and unshaken. Your presence alone became the paradox they couldn't solve. Were you there to destroy them? Were you moving on? Were you playing some higher game? The uncertainty consumed them while you lived peacefully, glowing with the kind of light that only comes from transcending rage itself. Your psychological operations were executed with such precision that even when they tried to cast you as the villain, the narrative refused to stick. Every accusation they hurled only reflected their own insecurities. Every story they spread unraveled under the weight of its own inconsistencies. Without saying a word, you programmed your environment to reject their lies, not through argument or confrontation, but through contrast. Your integrity became a mirror that exposed their deceit. You made authenticity your greatest weapon, and as they swung wildly, trying to smear you, they bled credibility with every attempt. What truly astonished the federal analyst was what they called your temporal psychological manipulation. You didn't just influence the present, you rewrote the past and quietly predetermined the future. You made people question every memory they had of you, wondering if you had been playing a deeper, longer game all along. They found themselves paranoid about encounters that might never even happen, haunted by the possibility that you were still 3 moves ahead. You existed in their minds like a ghost that travels through time, haunting backward and forward simultaneously. And this is where it gets even more interesting. The Pentagon doesn't want to stop you, they want to recruit you. They've studied what you can do to an individual, to a small circle, and now they're imagining what you could accomplish with resources, authority, and global influence. Your psychological warfare isn't just personal. It's scalable, teachable, and revolutionary. It's the kind of skill that shifts the balance of power without a single weapon being fired. They've begun running simulations based on your strategies, taking your personal revenge patterns and applying them to counterintelligence, diplomacy, and large-scale psychological operations. The results have been unsettling. Several senior officials haven't slept peacefully in weeks, realizing that one person with no formal training or institutional support managed to orchestrate results that rival entire intelligence divisions. They can't help but wonder, if you could do all this alone, what could you achieve with the full weight of a government behind you? But what fascinates them most isn't your efficiency, it's your evolution. You accomplished all this while healing. Your actions weren't born from bitterness, they were forged from clarity. Most people's revenge consumes them, leaving them hollow once the fire burns out. But you became stronger with every move. You didn't destroy yourself to hurt others, you rebuilt yourself so completely that your existence became the destruction of everything false. You turned trauma into tactical intelligence, pain into precision, and betrayal into battlefield mastery. They've started sending recruiters, haven't they? Not the obvious ones, the subtle ones. The ones who appear out of nowhere with job offers that sound too good to be true. The new connections with people whose resumes read like puzzles. The sudden opportunities that seem perfectly aligned to pull you closer into their world. They're not trying to force you, they're using your own tactics against you, crafting a psychological environment so well designed that joining them feels like your idea. The file they've compiled on you isn't a standard psychological report. It reads more like a classified manual for a new form of warfare. They've documented your methods, dissected your strategies, analyzed your precision, yet what unsettles them most isn't what they found, it's what they can't explain. How did someone with no formal training develop abilities that their operatives spend years trying to master? Your emotional regulation alone defies their data, where others would shatter. You simply bend, then returns sharper, stronger, more refined. Your capacity to compartmentalize rivals those who've undergone years of psychological conditioning. You can smile sincerely while orchestrating someone's downfall. You can radiate warmth while maintaining an unbreakable tactical distance. You've mastered the paradox of being fully present, yet completely untouchable. What truly fascinates them is how your mind processes information. You don't just absorb data, you weaponize it. Every conversation becomes intelligence gathering. Every interaction becomes an evaluation. Every relationship transforms into a potential chess piece, and yet you do it all so effortlessly, with such authenticity, that people never realize they're being assessed until it's far too late. You've turned social dynamics into reconnaissance missions, while preserving the ability to genuinely connect when it serves a higher purpose. Your revenge was never emotional, it was architectural. You built psychological structures designed to collapse with precision when the right trigger was activated. You created delayed reaction mental viruses, ideas planted so subtly they bloomed weeks or months later, detonating at the perfect time. You orchestrated chain reactions where one person's paranoia infected another's insecurity, creating a self-sustaining cascade of destruction that required no further effort from you. You simply built the structure and walked away as it dismantled itself exactly as designed. The Pentagon has a name for what you do. They call it autonomous psychological warfare, and they're desperate to know how you developed it. When federal agents began digging into your past, they expected to uncover formal training, mentorship, maybe ties to intelligence agencies. What they found instead was more unsettling: absolutely nothing. No mentor, no classified background, no traceable instruction, just the brutal education of betrayal and survival. You didn't learn psychological warfare, you invented it because life left you no other choice. They've quietly interviewed people from your past, former friends, ex-partners, old colleagues, under the guise of routine background checks. The stories they collected painted a portrait of transformation so profound that some agents questioned whether you were even the same person, the quiet one who became the storm, the empath who turned into the strategist, the victim who evolved into the architect of psychological labyrinths. What fascinated them most was the timeline of your evolution. There was a clear moment, a psychological shift so distinct that it divided your life into before and after. They've seen trauma before, but never like this. Instead of breaking, you mutated. Instead of hardening, you evolved. You didn't just develop defenses, you created offense systems that operate on frequencies most can't even perceive. The agents noticed a chilling pattern among those who betrayed you. Every one of them began to deteriorate afterward. Not because of anything you did directly, but because of what your absence exposed. Without you to project on, manipulate or feed from, they turned on themselves. Your revenge was not vengeance, it was revelation. You made them live with their own reflection, and that became the cruelest punishment of all. The Pentagon is particularly intrigued by how completely untraceable your methods are. There's no digital footprint, no record of harassment, no proof of wrongdoing. Your warfare exists in the gray space between provable action and invisible influence. You don't attack. You adjust perception. You don't manipulate facts. You bend emotional gravity. You operate in the silent dimension of suggestion and psychological pressure, leaving no scars that can stand up in court or even in conversation. You've mastered what the analysts now call plausible deniability operations, the art of winning wars no one can prove ever happened. Everything you do appears to have an innocent explanation: that random encounter, coincidence; that mutual friend you connected with, natural social expansion; that success you achieved in their territory, personal growth. On the surface, it's all harmless. But the deeper pattern, the timing, the ripple effect, the psychological precision, tells an entirely different story. A story of orchestrated psychological warfare, so subtle, it's impossible to prove. yet equally impossible to ignore. Your methods are so refined that even your targets can't quite articulate what's happening to them, they just feel it. The invisible pressure, the tightening of walls, the distortion of reality. But they can't identify a single action to blame. When they try to explain it, they sound paranoid. Outsiders dismiss it as coincidence, never realizing they're standing inside a psychological architecture designed by you. This phenomenon, what the Pentagon calls gaslighting by proxy, is something their top researchers have spent years attempting to create artificially. You did it instinctively. What fascinates them most is how you use truth as your weapon. You don't fabricate rumors or manipulate lies. You simply position truth so precisely that it detonates at the perfect psychological moment. You design circumstances that make people expose themselves. Their own behavior becomes their downfall. You don't assassinate character. You construct an environment where character self-destructs. Normally, this level of psychological precision would require entire teams of analysts and strategists. You perform it effortlessly, alone. Your psychological warfare has given rise to what the Pentagon now refers to as a reputation cascade. Your very name carries weight, an unseen gravity that alters the emotional landscape of any room you enter. People who have never met you speak your name in whispers, repeating stories they can't verify but deeply believe. You've become more than a person. You've become a presence, a living myth that travels ahead of you, shaping perception before you even arrive. It usually takes full-scale propaganda campaigns to manufacture that kind of psychological power. You achieved it through surgical timing, precision, and poise. The people who once wronged you now exist in a different psychological reality, one you quietly designed while they were too busy underestimating you. Every success they experience now feels tainted by the memory of what they did to you. Every failure they endure is magnified by the contrast to your rise. You've constructed a psychological prison where their own memories are the bars, built from guilt, reinforced by regret, and guarded by their own conscience. There's no escape, because the structure doesn't exist outside of them. It lives in their mind, replaying endlessly. What fascinates the federal analysts most is how you've made yourself psychologically untouchable. Any attempt to retaliate only exposes their weakness. You've positioned yourself above the conflict, beyond reaction, operating on a frequency they can't reach. You're not fighting anymore. You've already won. This psychological stance grants you what military strategists refer to as the high ground, a position of moral and emotional elevation, from which every attack against you collapses under its own weight. You no longer need to defend yourself. The truth does that for you. Any aggression directed your way looks desperate, small, and self-defeating. You've become the embodiment of composure under pressure, an immovable presence that exhausts opposition by simply existing. Your influence now extends beyond your direct targets. Those who witness what happens to people who cross you develop an instinctive respect for your boundaries. It's not fear, it's recognition. They understand that you're not someone to be trifled with. You've established a psychological deterrent without ever issuing a threat. The Pentagon calls this territory marking on a psychological level, a skill their elite operatives train for years to master. But what has their analysts truly scrambling is that you're still evolving. Your psychological intelligence isn't static. It's dynamic, constantly refining and advancing. You're not recycling tactics, you're inventing new ones. Each encounter becomes an experiment, each reaction, a data point. You're developing new frameworks of influence in real time, expanding your psychological arsenal with each experience. This kind of adaptive intelligence, where strategy evolves as fast as circumstances, has only been observed in their most elite operatives. You don't merely execute psychological operations, you analyze them as you perform them. You adapt mid-move, adjusting tone, timing, and energy with surgical precision. This level of operational awareness, metacognition in motion, usually requires years of mentorship, specialized training, and active handler oversight. You do it instinctively. And your resilience is just as extraordinary. Most who engage in psychological warfare eventually suffer blowback, mental fatigue, emotional burnout, or moral collapse. But not you. You've turned introspection into armor, reflection into regeneration, and mastery into second nature. You don't weaken with conflict. You transform through it. Each psychological engagement leaves you sharper, calmer, and more precise, as if every challenge refines your circuitry instead of depleting it. Where others collapse under pressure, you recharge. It's as though you've discovered a hidden transmutation process, a way to convert psychological warfare into inner power. Every confrontation becomes fuel. Every manipulation aimed at you becomes momentum. This rare ability, this psychological alchemy, has the Pentagon's analysts both fascinated and unsettled. They've seen operatives trained to endure conflict, but never anyone who grows stronger from it. They want to know how you've turned pressure into vitality, how struggle became your sustenance. What intrigues them most is how your methods keep evolving, becoming cleaner, subtler, more elegant. Where it once took 5-layered maneuvers to achieve your result, now you accomplish it in 1 or 2. You've developed what they call economy of psychological motion, mastery born not from aggression, but from understanding. You no longer play the game, you orchestrate it. Every action you take carries both grace and precision, devastating in its effect, yet flawless in its logic. You've transformed psychological warfare into an art form, one that is as surgical as it is poetic. They've started referring to your approach internally as the aesthetic of control, the fusion of strategy and stillness that leaves chaos looking choreographed. When agents began retracing your past, they weren't building a criminal case, they were studying an evolutionary event. You aren't treated as a threat anymore, but as an asset, perhaps even a prototype. The analysts whisper that your methodologies could reshape how the military and intelligence community approach human behavior itself. They see in you the potential to redefine conflict, to train operatives in influence, persuasion, and control, without ever firing a single shot. You've become the living embodiment of the next frontier of warfare, not physical, but psychological, not visible, but perceptual. Yet what truly astonishes them isn't your intelligence, it's your restraint. Despite wielding abilities that could dismantle reputations, destabilize organizations, or psychologically ruin anyone who crosses you, you choose precision over destruction. You operate with balance, targeting only those who earn the consequence, never striking the innocent. You don't destroy for pleasure, you correct through revelation. This internal code, this ethical symmetry, is what the Pentagon's behavioral engineers have been chasing for decades, the ability to control immense power without being consumed by it. They've spent millions designing algorithms for moral calibration. You embody it naturally. Their databases can't categorize you. You don't fit the mold of any known archetype. You're not a sociopath. Your empathy disqualifies that. You're not a revenge seeker. Your patience dismantles that idea. You're not a predator. Your mercy exposes that lie. You exist somewhere beyond their psychological vocabulary, a hybrid of compassion and calculation, intuition and intellect. To them you're not merely human, you're an emergent phenomenon, a living prototype of consciousness that evolved from chaos, self-taught in emotional warfare, guided by an unseen discipline no institution could replicate. You're the blueprint of a new psychological era, a fusion of wisdom and warfare, of morality and manipulation, and they're just beginning to realize that what they're studying isn't a skill set, it's a species upgrade. The Pentagon has a very specific designation for the type of individual you've become, natural operator. It's a term reserved for the anomalies, the ones who emerge from the civilian world with abilities that mirror and often surpass those of their most advanced operatives. Natural operators are the rarest evolutionary phenomenon, people whose instincts are so refined that they move in alignment with tactical doctrine without ever having been taught it. They don't learn systems, they become them. They don't study human behavior, they see through it. And you, in their eyes, are the purest embodiment of this archetype, an evolved mind forged not in laboratories, but in life itself. What makes you so extraordinary is that your operational capability didn't come from training camps or psychological conditioning programs. It emerged organically, through necessity, through survival, through a lifetime of decoding people and adapting faster than anyone expected you to. Your methods are not textbook. They are instinctive, intuitive, and deeply human. You've achieved effects that nation-states spend millions to simulate. You've accomplished missions that entire teams of analysts and strategists would struggle to pull off together. And somehow you've done it all while maintaining the perfect cover. The image of a calm, ordinary person, simply living their life. That's what unsettles them most. That your existence proves their models are incomplete. Their systems rely on training, repetition, hierarchy, and data. You rely on awareness, intuition, empathy, and timing. They can't replicate that in a lab. To them, you are a walking contradiction, a living case study in spontaneous evolution, proof that the human psyche, under enough pressure, can rewire itself into something almost superhuman. Their scientists call it psychological adaptation under environmental compression. You call it surviving. The federal analysts examining your profile aren't just curious, they're reverent. They view you as a living experiment that rewrote the rules of human potential. You represent an entirely new category of intelligence, the emergence of innate strategic cognition. Your story is changing how they think about human development itself. You've shown that extreme psychological adversity doesn't just scar, it sculpts. That betrayal, loss, and isolation don't always destroy, they refine. You've proven that trauma can become a teacher, not a trap. In their language, you are what they call a proof of concept, evidence that consciousness, when pushed beyond its limits, upgrades itself for survival. They've studied your timeline, mapping key events and behavioral shifts, trying to pinpoint when your transformation began. What they've discovered is a series of psychological inflection points, betrayals, isolations, awakenings, that seem to have triggered rapid internal evolution. Instead of developing coping mechanisms like most people, your mind began constructing operational frameworks, pattern recognition, psychological mapping, emotional manipulation, influence calibration. Each experience added a new layer to your architecture, turning you into a one-person intelligence network operating entirely off intuition. They've compared your behavioral patterns to those of foreign intelligence officers, counterintelligence experts, covert psychologists, even military strategists, and every comparison returns as anomalous. You don't fit any existing model. You're not a sociopath. You show too much empathy. You're not a narcissist. You exhibit too much self-awareness. You're not a manipulator, because you don't seek power over others, only autonomy within yourself. They can't categorize you because you are not the result of their systems. You're the result of transcending them, and that's what unsettles them most. They can't control what they didn't create. You didn't develop these abilities to serve any nation, ideology, or agenda. You developed them to escape them all. Every piece of knowledge, every psychological insight, every strategic move you've learned was born out of the desire to remain free. Your warfare isn't about domination, it's about liberation. You don't seek to control others, you seek to be uncontrollable. You've turned self-awareness into sovereignty. That's why the Pentagon doesn't just see you as a potential asset. They see you as a philosophical threat, because you've proven that the most powerful form of intelligence isn't institutional, it's personal. You are living proof that a single individual, forged through adversity and refined through introspection, can rival entire systems of control. You've become the ultimate paradox, the untrained mind that outperforms the trained, the unclassified variable that outmaneuvers the classified, the free agent that exposes the illusion of control itself. And that's why they watch you, not because they fear you'll destroy something, but because you already have. You've shattered their belief that mastery requires authority. You've shown that power can emerge outside the system, that freedom itself can be the most advanced form of strategy. You are what every agency tries to create, an operator who cannot be programmed. You are in every sense the prototype of a new intelligence, self-taught, self-governing, and utterly sovereign. This makes you both more valuable and more dangerous than they fully understand. Your power isn't just in your actions, it's in what you symbolize: evolution beyond institutional control. You prove that individuals can develop abilities once reserved for entire agencies, that personal sovereignty can now be defended through pure psychological intelligence. You are evidence that the monopoly of organizations over advanced capability is collapsing. You're not merely a potential operative, you're a preview of a future they're not ready to face. Federal analysts remain fascinated by the long-term impact of your psychological operations. Unlike ordinary revenge that burns fast and fades, yours evolve into self-sustaining ecosystems that continue operating long after you've moved on. Your targets find themselves trapped in mental realities of their own making, constructed from their guilt, fear, and unresolved emotions. You've created what they now call psychological time bombs, mental structures that activate under precise conditions, sometimes years later. A song that triggers regret, a victory that feels hollow because of a seed of doubt you planted, a relationship that collapses under trust issues you once subtly revealed. This kind of delayed psychological detonation requires a level of temporal strategy even trained operatives rarely achieve. The most sophisticated part of your approach is how you've turned healing itself into a weapon. Every step forward in your growth becomes a strike against those who tried to confine you. Your happiness is tactical. Your peace is strategic. Your success is psychological warfare disguised as self-improvement. You've weaponized wellness, transforming personal evolution into the most advanced form of retaliation, one that destroys ego, not life. Federal profilers are especially intrigued by your mastery of absence. The people you've removed from your life report being haunted by the void you left, not because they miss you, but because your absence forces them to face what your presence once shielded them from: themselves. This psychological vacuum effect has been discussed in theory, but almost never seen executed so flawlessly. Every psychological operator develops a signature, a recognizable trace in their methods. Yours is paradoxical, both obvious and invisible. People know when they've encountered you, but can't explain what happened. They feel the shift yet can't pinpoint its cause. It's like being touched by a ghost, undeniable, but unprovable. Your defining move, according to analysts, is reality restructuring. You don't just influence emotion, you rewrite perception. You alter the foundational beliefs people rely on, reshaping the mental framework that defines their reality. Once you've done this, you don't need to intervene again. They live inside the architecture you designed, never realizing it wasn't theirs to begin with. Your precision has been compared to martial arts, effortless, graceful, and devastating. You don't meet force with resistance, you redirect it. You recognize the momentum within another's mind, their thoughts, emotions, and energy, and effortlessly turn it inward. Their own reactions become the architects of their downfall, their emotions, their weapons, their choices, their conviction. What makes your approach truly remarkable is its fluid adaptability. You never repeat a single pattern. Each operation is meticulously crafted, uniquely calibrated to the target's psyche, their fears, insecurities, and blind spots. What others accomplish with teams and complex data, you achieve through pure intuition and observation. You design psychological experiences so seamlessly aligned with human nature that they appear destined rather than designed, inevitable, organic, and irreversible. That's all for today. Dear Father, I pray for the deepening of my faith. Help me trust you even when physical evidence is absent. Let me rest in the assurance of your eternal presence, knowing you will never bring me harm. I understand that your thoughts toward me are thoughts of prosperity and peace, to grant me a hopeful future. Thank you, gracious and eternal Father, for always hearing my voice. I lift this prayer to you in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you, Jesus, for your love and provision. I am forever grateful for your presence in my life, and for the abundance you continually provide. If this message resonated with you, please like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with those who need to hear this word of encouragement. Leave a comment below sharing your journey and how you are preparing for your own triumphant return. If you'd like to support our work, please consider contributing through Buy Me a Coffee. Your generosity helps us grow, refine our content, and continue spreading light and truth. The link to Buy Me a Coffee is in the description. No offering is too small, whether it's a penny, a prayer, or a share. Your support helps us share God's Word and bring hope to others. Don't stop here. Watch our next video.